Hello, Mr. Martino here from your favorite teacher. Today we're going to be looking at fractions and specifically what we call equivalent fractions. So, what is a fraction? A fraction is when we have one number divided by another number. In this case, 2 divided by 3. And we write it as it looks on the screen. We call the 2 or the top part of the fraction the numerator. And this is how many of the equal parts we're interested in. And we call the 3, or the bottom part of the fraction, the denominator. And this is how many equal parts the shape or quantity is split into. So, suppose I asked, which of these is the biggest piece of pizza? A half, 4/8, or 2/4? If we look at the 3 circles that have been split into different pieces, we can shade the amounts that we're asking for to get a sense of how many pieces it would be. If we did shade it in, these are the amounts that we would get. We can see very easily that they are all the same amount of pizza. So even though they are different fractions of pizza, it's the same amount with a half, with 4/8, and with 2/4. So therefore, we call all of these 3 fractions equivalent fractions because they are the same amount, just having different numerators and denominators. Let's do some calculations now to find equivalent fractions. What fraction is equivalent to 2/7? In the example, we know it's going to have 8 as a numerator, and our problem is to find what would the denominator be in that case. To do it, we compare the numerators, and we look at what number would 1 multiply to get to the next. In this case, we can see that 2 multiplies by 4 to give 8, and therefore we have to do the same thing with the denominators to get the answer. So we have to say 7 multiplied by 4, which in this case is 28, would be our answer. So 2/7 is equivalent to 8/28, or 8/28. Let's take a look at another example. How can we convert 3/5 into 20ths? In the last example, we compared numerators. Here, we're going to compare denominators. So, how many times does 5 go into 20? 5 times 4 is 20. So therefore, we have a number that we will multiply 3 by to get the equivalent number as a numerator. So that becomes 12/20 is the equivalent fraction to 3/5. So we say these 2 fractions are equivalent. Your turn now to have a try. You have to make some equivalence with both numerators and denominators. You can pause for about 5 to 7 minutes to do this, and then we're going to look at the answers. Okay? If you're finished, we're going to go on to the answers. If you're still working, you can keep the video paused. And the answers that are equivalent are there. So 2/3 is equivalent to 10 over 15, or 5/6 is equivalent to 10 over 12, etc. So why do we actually get equivalent fractions? There are two main reasons. One is to compare different fractions to see which are bigger or smaller than others. And two, sometimes we need to simplify a large number of fractions to make them smaller in number. Let's take a look at these two sets of fractions. Which of these pairs of fractions do we find easy to compare? If I have 3/8 and I'm trying to compare with 5/8, they're both 8. In other words, they're both split into 8 parts. So obviously 5/8 would be bigger than 3/8. But what about if I had 5/6 and trying to compare it with 11/12? We can't compare those two as it is because the denominators are not the same. We have to always try and make the denominators the same when we are trying to get equivalent fractions. So let's change 5/6 into 12ths. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to say 5/6 is equal to what over 12? And we do the same thing that we did before. And we say 6 goes into 12 twice. In other words, 6 times 2 is 12. So we're going to do the same thing with the numerator. We get 5 times 2 is 10. So 5/6 is equivalent to 10/12. We can now compare 10/12 and 11/12. And obviously 11/12 is going to be bigger than 10/12. So I'd now like you to write these different sets of fractions in order of smallest to biggest. And this should take, again, between 8 to 10 minutes. So you can pause the video now until you are finished. Okay, we're going to now look at the answers. And it means that 8/12 is the smallest of all of our fractions. Then 3/4, then 7/9, then 29/36, and then finally 5/6 is the biggest fraction of all of those. Hope this was helpful. This is Mr. Martineau from your favorite teacher.